Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. We are continuing to have some absolutely beautiful weather here in the mountains of Arkansas right now. Although my allergies aren't appreciating it, the rest of me sure is. Now, normally in the wintertime, our chickens will slow way down or even completely stop laying eggs, but this year they have been very generous, and we've been getting about a dozen eggs per day, even when it's extremely cold outside. My dogs have been appreciating all of the extra goodies as well. Every other week or so, I do a huge purge and scramble up a whole bunch of eggs and feed them to them. They love it. I've also been freeze drying eggs and putting it away for long-term storage. Now later in this video, I'm going to be sharing the first of my March Canning Madness videos. That is an open collaboration that I started doing a few years ago. This is a collaboration that anyone can participate in, and there will even be some giveaways taking place later on at the end of March. I share all about that in the video and a blog post article, and I'll link to that in the video description down below. I keep an old cutting tool in our horse trailer where we store our hay bales. I found it once a long time ago. I don't know what this thing is called, but it sure is handy. I don't have any more treats, baby. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Now, in my last video, I shared about the little project in the kitchen that turned into a big project. And right now, everything is a little bit on pause. Mr. Smith was out of town, and I decided to wait and have him give me a hand with some of the stuff because it turned out to be a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be. Now, I do have an addition, at least temporarily, to the kitchen, and that is this old antique table that I found at the antique store. I actually went in for the table that I shared about in a previous video, but as I was looking at it, I thought, you know, I really want a table that you can sit at. And while I loved that old table that was there, the big, chunky, primitive one, because of the sides, you really couldn't sit at it very well. There's no way you could get your knees underneath it. And so I thought, before I buy this, let me just do one more walkthrough of the antique store and see what I can find. See if there's anything else. And sure enough, I found this really neat table. It's made out of hickory wood, and it came from a place in Indiana where it was made. I love that the legs have that rustic, straight out of the woods look. And the top of this table is in nearly perfect condition. The other table, while I loved it, had big splits in the wood. In order for the tabletop to really be functional, I would have had to have had some glass or something made to cover the top of it. But as you can see, I can use this table just as it is. Now, this is the space that I am going to build a custom-made cabinet piece. But I also know that with March Canning Madness coming and everything else, I'm not going to have the time to work on that. And so that is why I went ahead and I picked up this table. And with March Canning Madness coming up, I'm going to need all the counter space and workspace that I can get. And so this is going to be a great fill-in. So like I said, I decided to put the work that I was doing on a very short pause because Mr. Smith has been out of town. And I decided I could use the help getting the rest of these cabinets out because it took me 3 days to get just the first 2 sections out because the wood was so incredibly hard. Now we have decided that we're going to go ahead and replace these old cabinets that had been in here with new ones that'll match the ones I've already installed on the other side of the kitchen. I'll paint them the same sort of sagey green color like I did the rest of the lower cabinets. And then I'll go ahead and install the white milk glass handles. Now on the old cabinets here, I did install the drawer pulls as handles for the cabinet, which isn't ideal, but because they already had the holes drilled, I just went ahead and put them on there. I'll utilize those for the new drawers after I install them. So when Mr. Smith gets home, and by the time this video goes up, he'll already be here, he'll give me a hand getting the rest of this stuff out of there, removing the copper pipes that we're not going to need, and then we'll pull out the cabinets. And once they're all out, we can go ahead and replace all of the old insulation that I pulled out, close the wall back up, make it look nice, and then install the new cabinets. And then once the new cabinets are in, then I'll be able to go ahead and paint the rest of the kitchen. You can still see the nail holes and the screw holes and just the rough wall that was here after I took off that colorful fake wood contact paper basically that was there when we bought our cabin. It'll be nice to have that finished. Another thing that I'm going to do is replace the trim around the window. As you can see, I've already removed some of it, but I will get rid of that rough lumber and replace it with proper trim. But one of the things that I have already done while waiting for Mr. Smith to come back is paint the side of my refrigerator. When we bought our house, it came with the fridge, but the side of it was this dingy gray that was scratched up, marred up, and it was just ugly. Plus, the dark gray absorbed the light and made it really dark in the corner. And when you do photography, food photography, and filming, you need all the light that you can get. Now, originally, I had covered the side of this with some white contact paper, but honestly, it just looked tacky, and I knew eventually I was going to paint it. And so I decided it was time to do that. Now, I still need to put another coat on, but I've been letting it fully dry and harden up, and then I'll put the final coat on there. But it is already looking so much better. Now, in my video the other day, I actually had someone make a comment about the wood that was used to build this cabinet over here, because I was having such a struggle cutting the wood. Now, one person thought I was hitting the sink, and that's why it couldn't go any further, but I had actually cut several lines parallel, and both of the saws that I used initially, my jigsaw and my circular saw, as soon as they hit that wood that was part of the frame, they stopped and just would not go any further. And so I wasn't hitting the sink. Now, in the last cut that I did, where I was able to finally get it to go through past this piece of wood in here, I was skirting the top of the edge of the sink, but that wasn't what had caused the saw to stop, because the same thing happened when I was trying to cut the frame at the bottom of the cabinet. Now, another comment that was in the video said something along the lines of, well, you know it's not ironwood because if you were trying to cut ironwood, you'd be throwing metal shavings and everything else. But here's the thing. I was throwing metal shavings, especially when I was trying to do the one on the bottom of the cabinet. When I was trying to cut the top piece and it was striking that board in there, it was stopping so hard that I thought maybe I was hitting metal. And that is why you saw me taking the hammer and the pry bars and all of that and taking apart this cabinet piece by piece, because I was trying to see inside this cabinet to discover what in the world I was hitting. Is there metal in there? Am I hitting nails? What am I hitting? But it was just the wood. There was no metal other than the nails at the joints where the pieces were put together. And those pieces I cut with my Sawzall and the metal cutting blades. Y'all, this was just wood. But that comment about it being ironwood caught my attention, because the more I thought about it, I think that's what it was, or is, because it's still in the rest of this cabinet. Now, if you don't know that kind of wood, it's also called Osage orange or horse apples. It's got several names, but there's three features that really make this kind of wood stand out. Number one is the fruit that it produces. The first time I saw this fruit was in Alabama when we lived in military housing. It actually was rolling down the hill where I would walk my dogs, and I had never seen this before. To me, it looked like a green brain. It was so strange. But when I looked it up, I realized what it was. It was the fruit of this tree that I had never experienced before. But another trait of this wood is it is very orange in color. And then, of course, it is extremely hard. It is often used for fence posts and sometimes building material because it is so hard and durable. This cutting board that was gifted to me by one of my subscribers in Alabama is actually made from that kind of tree, from that kind of wood. And when I knock on it, I don't know if you can hear it. This is a really hard wood. It doesn't sound like other wood when I'm using a knife on it. It is extremely dense, extremely hard, and it has that signature orangey color. Well, the wood that is in here is very similar in color. Now, it's not as dark in orange as this is, but this is a cutting board and it's been oiled many times, so it has that dark, rich color. But if you can see in there and see that board that's between the cabinet and the plywood countertop, you'll notice it's really orange. So y'all, I think that's what that was. Because when this was built, more than likely the wood came from one of the many local sawmills. And because these trees do grow here, they tend to be very prolific in some areas. It makes sense that that is the wood that was likely used for this. It's practically indestructible, really hard and dense, and it's local. Now, I will tell you, I think maybe one of the reasons we've gotten so many eggs this past winter is because we've got free roaming mountain chickens. These chickens take off into the woods as soon as we let them out in the morning, and they have all of these woods to look for bugs, to look for things to eat. Because they have access to all of this, we don't have to feed them very much. We offer them food, but they'd rather go off and forage in the woods. Now, granted, we do lose a chicken from time to time from predators, but I think that's the price of allowing chickens to live a free roaming happy life. And I know some people don't like that. They think we're bad chicken tenders by letting this happen, but this is nature and it is the circle of life. And I think it is a good trade-off for having happy chickens living naturally in the mountains of Arkansas. And now for the March canning madness. All right, friends, so the next thing that I'm going to share with all of you is the first submission of mine for March Canning Madness. And March Canning Madness is an open collaboration that is for anyone who has a YouTube channel that wants to participate. I started doing this a few years ago, and it's just to encourage people to can all the things that they've been wanting to can before garden season and all the other busyness of life starts up in the springtime. And so I shared all of the details for this open collaboration in a video where I talk about how people can participate, the prizes that are being given away, not only for those who make videos, but those of you who watch the videos. I will put a link to that blog post and video in the description underneath this video. So the recipe that I'm sharing with y'all today is for apple pie filling that does not use any kind of thickener. You don't have to use thickener when you are actually doing the canning. And I have found that I like omitting the thickener, clear gel generally, because it gives me more flexibility with what I'm going to make with this apple pie filling. I can use it in cobblers, I can use it in all different things, and I don't have to worry about any sort of conflict with the ingredients. And additionally, if you've got family members with food allergies or anything like that, you can again control your ingredients more and just have more flexibility with your apple pie filling. So I'm going to show you the canning of this right here, and then afterwards I'm going to share with you how I would utilize this for a pie. So to begin with the apple pie filling, I'm starting off by washing and then peeling 24 cups of apples. And I'm using some of the Granny Smith apples that I had gotten from an Azure Standard order last month. I had so many apples to go through, and apple pie filling was just one of the several apple recipes that I made. As I peeled the apples, I put them in a bowl of cold water that had ascorbic acid in there to keep the apples from browning. I had a whole lot of apples to can up. I even pulled out my big bowl. Once the apples were peeled, I went ahead and used my handy little apple cutting tool to remove the core and cut the apples. Now, as I cut up the apples and measured them, I went ahead and put them back into the big bowl to keep them from browning. But honestly, because I was going to be putting cinnamon and nutmeg in there, the apples are going to end up brown anyway, so I don't necessarily know that this is a step that you need to do, but it's the general practice when it comes to cutting up apples. You can also use lemon juice in the water, but if you want to save your lemon juice, you could probably skip that step if you like. So I put my 24 cups of apples into a big non-reactive pot, and I added in a tablespoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of nutmeg, half a cup of lemon juice, and 2 cups of granulated sugar. And then I mix this all together and let it sit for about an hour. While the apples were resting with all of the spices and lemon juice and all of that, I still had a lot more apples to go through, and so I started prepping the rest of the apple pieces. This ended up being about 3/4 of a regular batch, and so I just reduced all of the other ingredients by 1/4. Now the full recipe gives you about 4 quarts of apple pie filling. So this partial batch was going to give me 3 quarts instead. So while this batch was resting for an hour, I went ahead and started canning up the first batch. After it had rested for an hour, I brought all of the ingredients up to a gentle boil, and then I reduced the heat down to a simmer and let the apples and the spices and the lemon juice simmer together for 5 minutes. And then it's time to jar it up. I had my 4-quart jars hot and ready to go. Of course, you always want to wash all of your canning supplies. You want to check your jars to make sure that there's no chips or flaws on the rims of the jars, because if there is, it can cause your jars to not seal properly. So always inspect your jars, make sure there's no flaws, and make sure everything is clean and ready to go when it's time to can up whatever it is you're preserving. So I'm ladling my hot apple pie filling into the 4-quart size mason jars, and I'm going to divide all of the apple filling equally between the 4 jars. So I'm making sure I have apples in there divided equally, and then after all of the apples are in there, I go ahead and I get the remaining juice that is still in the pot and I pour it into all 4 of the jars. Then I take a bubble wand or chopstick and I remove any air bubbles, make sure there's no pockets of air or anything like that, and then press all of the apples down into the liquid. And I'm going to do that with all 4 of the jars. Now, apple pie filling has a tendency to want to try and seep out, so I always make sure to give it a full inch of headspace, which is the space between the top of the jar and the top of the contents. Then wipe down the rim very well with a damp rag dipped in white vinegar to make sure there's no residue to keep your jars from sealing. Add a lid and ring, finger tight, and into the canner with all of them. The processing time for this apple pie filling, whether you're using a hot water bath canner or the steam canner like I use, which is for high acid foods, is 20 minutes. Of course, you want to adjust that for your elevation. And I have an article on my website that tells you exactly how to do that if you live at an elevation higher than 1,000 feet. I'll put a link to that in the video description down below. And there you go, my 2 batches, or 1 3/4 of homemade apple pie filling. Alright friends, so as you saw, the apple pie filling was canned. Now I always leave my home canned goods to sit overnight, and then the next day I take off the rings, I test the seals by lifting the jars with the lid and giving it a good shake or a good tug. And as long as it's good and sealed, you're good to go. Anything that does not seal, which rarely happens, I would just simply put that in the fridge to use right away. And then all of the other jars, I wash them, I label them, and I put them away in the pantry. So when you're using the apple pie filling and you're wanting to make a pie or something along that lines, and you do want that thickening of the juices, all you have to do is drain out or strain out about 1/4 of a cup of the juice that is in here. Combine it with 2 tablespoons of cornstarch or your preferred thickener. Combine those in a little dish, whisk them together until they're nice and smooth, and then just mix them back into your apples and you're ready to use it. Now, 1 quart of the apple pie filling will make a 9-inch apple pie. And most often when people make apple pies, they do a 2-crust pie. So you would prepare your pie crust in your pie plate or pie dish, mix in your thickener, put your quart of filling into the pie crust, put your second crust on top, do a couple slits in the middle of it, or if you want to do your fancy like lattice type or something like that, however you like to do your top pie crust. And then you'll bake the apple pie in your oven at 375 degrees for 50 minutes. And that is it. Simple apple pie with your home canned apple pie filling, not canned with clear gel or anything like that. So that is it today, friends. Thank you for joining me here again at the homestead. Be sure to check out the playlist in the video description down below for March Canning Madness. All throughout the month, I will be adding submissions from all of the YouTubers out here who chose to participate with March Canning Madness. And remember, every video that you watch and leave a comment on for March Canning Madness 2025 is an entry for a giveaway, and I think you'll really like it. And if you miss those details, check out the link here in the card or find it in the video description down below. Oh, and of course, you can get a printable version of the apple pie filling recipe with all of the details on my website, cosmopolitancornbread.com, and you can find that linked down below as well. Thanks for joining me here again at the homestead, friends. My name is Constance from Cosmopolitan Cornbread. God bless, and I'll talk to y'all next time.